Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to look at lesson number 15, which is continuing on with trig. Yesterday we looked at finding missing sides of a right triangle using trig. Today we're going to do the kind of opposite of that, and we're going to look at finding missing angles. So we're going to use the same equations that we used to find missing sides. We're going to set up those same equations. It's just going to be how we solve them. We're going to solve them a little bit different. Using a different button in our calculator. So again, you are going to need your calculator today. And just like before, make sure that your calculator is in degree mode. So we are eventually going to look at something called radians. For now, we're working in degrees. So make sure that your calculator is in degree mode. So when we set up our trig functions, we still get something that looks like this, where we get sine, cosine, tangent of some angle equals a side over a side. And so what we're going to look at today is finding this missing angle here. And so just like when we do addition problems, so x plus 2 equals 10, we use the inverse operation, which in this case would be subtraction on both sides, which gives us x equals 8. So we use that inverse operation to solve. We're going to do the exact same thing today, and we're going to use the inverse operation of sine to get this theta by itself. And so if you look at your calculators, what you're going to do is you're going to take the inverse sine of both sides. Okay, on your calculators, you have this button, sine, it looks like to the negative first power, which really just represents the inverse sine. And so what happens here when we take the inverse sine of both sides, this sine inverse and this sine are going to cancel out, and just like we want, it's going to get theta by itself. And then here on the right side, we're going to get inverse sine of 3 over 7. And so in order to find this angle right here, we're simply going to type that into our calculator. So we're going to hit second sine, which is going to give you inverse sine, and you're going to type in 3/7. Again, make sure you're in degree mode, and that should give you, if we round to the tenths, 25.4. Again, we're finding the missing angle, so that is degrees. All right, same thing here. Now we're working with tangent. So the way that I get theta by itself is I take the inverse tangent on both sides. I'm not going to make you write this step right here. You can go directly to that next step. But this is what we're doing. We're taking the inverse tangent of both sides, which gives us theta equals inverse tangent of 10 over 9. Again, we type that into our calculator. Inverse tangent of 10 over 9. Rounding to the tenths, we will get 48.0 degrees. Down here, a little bit different. All right, so if you look at your calculators, you don't have a cosecant, a secant, a cotangent button on your calculator. You might be able to find it somewhere on some calculators, but we just have that sine, cosine, tangent. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first rewrite this so that it's sine, cosine, or tangent. And so first thing we have to think about is cosecant goes with sine. So this is the same thing as sine of theta equals, we know it's the reciprocal, 8 over 15. And so now that we have it like this, now we can do that problem. Now it's the same thing as what we did up here. So now we're just taking the inverse sine of this 8 over 15. And so that's giving us theta equals, type in our calculator, inverse sine, 8 over 15. We get 32.2. If you get in your calculator undefined or error, there is a reason for that. It probably means that you typed it in incorrectly. Maybe you flipped it. Maybe you put in 15 over 8 instead of 8 over 15. Your calculator is going to tell you that that's incorrect because your calculator knows that the hypotenuse, opposite over hypotenuse, has to be bigger. All right, so it'll tell you, it'll give you that feedback. So double check your work if you get that error. Same thing here. Okay, this is cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So I'm going to think about this as tangent. Now, we know it's the reciprocal. Well, the reciprocal of 4 is 1/4. So the reciprocal of 1.7587 is simply 1 over 1.7587. Once we get to there, then we can use our inverse tangent. So inverse tangent of this fraction 1 over 1.7587. Simply type that into our calculator. Inverse tangent of 1 over 1.7587, and we get 29.6. Again, we're finding an angle. We're doing it in degrees. Okay, so what we're about to do is we're going to get to this point that all of these questions are already in. For us, we're just going to be using sine, cosine, and tangent because we don't have to use cosecant and cotangent. And so once we get to this point, now we know how to solve it. Now what we're going to do is getting to this point, getting to make the problem look like 1 through 4. So let's take a look here. Okay, so it says find the measure of angle T, round to the nearest tenth. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and mark with a theta my angle T. Now, to set up our equation, we do the exact same thing that we did when we found missing sides. So I'm going to go ahead and label my sides first. So across from the right angle is my hypotenuse. Across from the angle we're using is my opposite. Next to it is my adjacent. Realize I don't even need the opposite side. So adjacent hypotenuse is cosine. So cosine of theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. So that step there is the exact same thing that we've been doing in the past. Now that we're here, now this is the exact same thing we just did on the previous slide. So we talked about the way that we get rid of this cosine, the way that we get theta by itself is we do the inverse cosine of our fraction here, 34 over 87. We type that into our calculator, inverse cosine, 34 divided by 87. When we round this, so we're going to get 66.99. And so when we round that, it's just going to round to 67.0 degrees. Over here, exact same thing. I'm going to go ahead and label theta, my angle that I'm looking for. So we're looking for angle T. So I'm going to put my theta here, label my sides, hypotenuse, adjacent, opposite. I don't need the adjacent side. So go ahead and choose opposite and hypotenuse is so. So sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. Inverse sine to get theta by itself, 7 over 18. Type that into our calculator. It's going to give us our angle of 22.9 degrees. Again, I know that this angle here, this angle T, has to be smaller than angle R just by looking at it and by seeing that ST is longer here. And I would find that if I actually found this side here. Okay, I want you guys to do these 3 examples. So pause your video, try those 3 examples. Once you're done, unpause your video and I'll have the answers there. All right, here's the answers that you should get. Check those, double check them, make sure you have yours correct, and then go ahead and move on to lesson number 15 practice.